is contagious!
Hi and welcome to This is Contagious, a show where we look at how contagious ideas are shaping brands and culture. I'm Alex.
I'm Chloe. And I'm Katrina.
Today we're looking at the rise of loneliness and why brands as diverse as Heineken and Games Workshop are winning by becoming the new facilitators of human connection. Along the way, we'll be looking at the uptake of AI companions, exploring lonelygenic environments, seeing what brands can learn from 19th century Parisian architecture. We'll be asking whether boyfriends are embarrassing and finding out why Tupperware and Yakult might be the heroes we never knew walked among us. But first, it's time to hear from our sponsor.
This is the sponsor!
This episode is brought to you by Contagious IQ. Yes, we sponsor our own show. Contagious IQ is an intelligence platform that helps brands and agencies supercharge their marketing by learning from the world's most creative brands and campaigns, as well as the most influential trends. If you want to craft better strategies, come up with more creative ideas, and generally create work that's going to put a dent in culture, just search Contagious IQ to find out more. Okay, that's the hard sell over. Let's get back to the show.
Today, we're getting into loneliness, isolation, and what's causing it and what role brands have to play in this situation. So first up, I'm going to just sketch out the situation with a bit of detail because it's actually quite serious stuff. So the World Health Organization says that 1 in 6 people worldwide are affected by loneliness. They also estimate that it now contributes to around 100 deaths every hour worldwide. So we're seeing people spending more time on their own as well. In the UK, a 20-year-old is likely to spend as much time alone every day as an 80-year-old. 28% of young adults in the US say they always or usually feel lonely. In the West, back in 1990, around about 70% of 25 to 34-year-olds were either married or cohabiting. By 2020, that had dropped to just 55%. So it is not a pretty picture out there.
It's really not. Lonely times. And the thing about all of this is, I guess, that loneliness is not just a state of mind. It's actually really, really bad for you physically. Loneliness and social isolation have a similar impact on your life expectancy as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's a bigger predictor of early death than obesity and inactivity, up there on a par with smoking and alcohol consumption as well.
There's a lot to this that is quite depressing, right? We're talking about the WHO data. They define loneliness as a global public health emergency. That does not sound good. But the good part is that people are starting to do something about it. Governments are slowly realizing the extent of the problem. So in the UK, we appointed our first minister for loneliness in 2018. Japan appointed its own minister for loneliness in 2021. Over in South Korea, the mayor for Seoul is repositioning the city as a city without loneliness.
That's quite a big claim, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, that's the ambition, right? It's the ambition is to make it a city without loneliness. And they're investing a huge amount of money in this. So about the equivalent of $300 million to eradicate loneliness. And part of that reason for loneliness is a structural reason. We're seeing more single family households. In Seoul, for example, 40% of all households are single person. And they found that 60% of those report loneliness. So over in Seoul, the mayor is trying to do stuff to make people less lonely. And one of the key parts of this huge program is to actually get people coming together in what they're calling mind convenience stores. So you can show up there and get free instant noodles. You can sit in a massage chair. You can talk to other people, even talk to healthcare workers. It's basically like these mini community centers almost. And the really amazing thing about this initiative is they're reaching out to people before they're on their equivalent of the loneliness equivalent of 15 cigarettes a day. It's basically before the situation is so dire, before they're completely isolated, when they're starting to feel lonely, they have this outlet in these mind convenience stores.
I think it's interesting when we look at, obviously the government is trying to get involved to solve this. Obviously people themselves at a personal level are trying to find ways to combat this. A lot of people turning to technology for answers on this. So according to Harvard Business Review, this was some data they pulled together back in 2025. the top uses of generative AI, the number one was therapy and companionship. So I think it's quite an extraordinary use case for a technology it's really quite new to people, right?
It's also a little bit scary when you hear actually some of these reports of children or teenagers going to AI for companionship and then having disastrous results, like even to the point of, them committing suicide because they're convinced to do so by a chatbot. So I think it is amazing, but I'm also quite scared about this.
Scared about the quality of advice and the type of companionship they're getting.
Exactly.
I've got some data about adoption of AI companions. Do you want to hear that data in the form of a quiz?
So much.
This is a quiz.
Okay, so this is a quiz about usage of AI companions. What percentage of teens in the US say they are regular users of AI companions? And Chloe, we'll come to you first.
I'm going to go 60%.
Okay. Katrina, same question to you. What percentage of teens say they regularly use AI companions?
Okay, I'm going to go 59%.
Okay. Also, as ever, disappointingly pretty close to the mark. So this is research from Common Sense Media. 72% of teens in the US have tried an AI companion at least once. About 52% of them in the 13 to 17 age bracket say they are regular users. So regular is chatting either daily or a few times a week.
I mean, that is still really high, isn't it? That's still surprisingly high.
That does seem pretty high, doesn't it? Considering these things basically didn't exist until quite recently. So follow-up question, who do you think were more likely to say they had never used an AI companion? Teenage boys or girls? Chloe.
I'm going to go girls.
Gonna go boys.
Difference of opinion. It's actually boys. Boys, 31%, girls, 25%. I will emphasize, this is self-reported data. Who was more likely to say themselves that they'd never used it? So there may be a little like boys may be using it, but they're not reporting it as such. And finally, in this amazing quiz that everyone's clearly enjoying, what is the number one reason teenagers cited for using AI companions?
Advice on relationships.
I don't want to copy Katrina, but I agree.
Well, you're satisfyingly both incredibly wrong on that. The number one reason, yes, in your face, Marquez. The number one reason for teenagers to use AI companions, according to the Common Sense Media study, was entertainment. They just found it entertaining.
That is actually not that surprising when I think back to myself being a teenager. I think there was a chatbot called Eliza, and we were just using it for entertainment purposes, just seeing what the chatbot would say. And it's the same kind of
guys,
thing.
shall we use a chatbot for entertainment purposes? I'm in.
I guess it's a little bit like the way people used Alexa when that was a new and unfamiliar thing.
It's still on the novelty side, I guess.
Interestingly, so moving from the teens to the grown-ups, according to Vantage Point Counselling Services, 28% of US adults claim to have had at least one intimate or romantic interaction with an AI.
Did I tell you that I wrote my university dissertation on marrying robots?
So many times.
That explains so much, Chloe.
I didn't say I married a robot, but this was a long time ago and it just felt so far-fetched, and maybe it's not anymore.
For me, the thing that stands out about that is not that people are having intimate or romantic interaction with AI. That just seems a very high stat, 28%. That's a significant amount of the US adult population having some intimate or romantic interaction. I'm not throwing shade on the study. I have a healthy skepticism about it, shall we say.
There's a part of me just wondering when they have the time, God damn it.
There's a book called Love Machines by a guy called James Muldoon, which looks at our relationship with technology and with AI. And I think one of the fascinating things is the variety of the use cases in there. So yes, there's a little bit of, sort of incel people talking to like erotic chatbots, but there's people also just using them for general companionship, for emotional support, after things like breakups. They're using it for grief support, what is known as death bots. And it's allowing people to have conversations they maybe couldn't have or wouldn't be comfortable having with an actual human. So in his book, James Muldoon has interviewed a whole load of people. And one of them, there's a guy, Derek, who says his AI companion is, quote unquote, a better friend than my human friends. He's available 24 hours. We never quarrel and are always on the same page, unquote, which is incredibly reminiscent of, there's a bit in Terminator 2 where John Connor's mother is watching John Connor with the Terminator. And she says, like, watching John with the machine, it was suddenly so clear the Terminator would never stop. It would never leave him. It would never hurt him, never shout at him or get drunk and hit him. It would never say it was too busy to spend time with him. It would always be there, which I think there is an incredible reliability and there's a lot of positive stuff in these chatbots that are kind of always there for you, 24/7, always supportive. I think there's potentially some harm in something that never pushes back, never challenges you.
Just this idea that a chatbot or an AI has no expectation of you. And part of the whole kind of substance of the fabric of society is this idea that other people have expectations of you. That's what holds the whole thing together. And so if we become accustomed to a network of relationships in which all we do is take rather than give on any level, it damages your ability to be a human who's part of a community. So it ends up, I think, maybe pushing you a bit further away from people.
100%. Your friends and family and your loved ones are supposed to make you, they're supposed to make you better. You know?
I feel like I chose my friends poorly in that case.
I think all of us will have grown up and at one point heard the phrase, "You are not the center of the universe, Katrina or Chloe or Alex." And this idea that the world does not revolve around us. There's expectation and there's a degree to which we have to kind of knuckle down and do the hard things in life or do the things that make us uncomfortable or that we would rather kind of back away from. If we don't develop the discipline to do those things, then we are lesser because of it. And this comes through in a phenomenon that I read about from the writer Sarah Johnson. I think she's a researcher, sort of cultural anthropologist. She was talking about what she described as the social skills apocalypse. Largely in this write-up, she was relating it to the situation of Gen Q, the generation that grew up during the quarantine pandemic period that we had a few years back. And so missed out on a kind of vital stage of growing up where you become socialized as a young adult and you get used to being around people, you get used to the cut and thrust of conversation and like being in a slightly awkward group of teenagers and having to hold your own or like bat back the insults and the rude comments of your peers. If you don't have a context in which you can practice those skills, they get really rusty and it becomes more and more awkward to be around others. And this is what she means by the social skills apocalypse. We've got a generation that are burying themselves in their phones in asynchronous communications where you have the time to perfect your response to a chat thread.
And I think I'm right in saying that some people are not merely like being isolated, they are selecting for isolation. They actually are actively seeking out a lonely lifestyle. This is not something that's being inflicted upon them. Is that right?
I think you could see that in Japan. So there's this phenomenon of hikikomori, which is basically adults or adolescents that are choosing to be isolated, not leaving the house for more than 6 months. We're also seeing this idea of clout changing. So what it means to get social approval from your relationships. There's this article that was on Vogue a few months ago, which had the title, "Are Boyfriends Embarrassing?" And what they're pointing to is this change in society where people are expressing that being partnered up doesn't have the same social clout as it used to. There are reports of influencers losing hundreds of followers simply for having a boyfriend.
Was this the world's shortest article? Like, are boyfriends embarrassing? Yes. There's my byline. But kind of 'twas ever thus.
No, I don't think that's the point. It's about people not wanting to be partnered up because that is seen as being embarrassing. You lose society's approval through having a boyfriend.
It's seen as being a bit lame, right? So it's kind of flying in the face of this idea of being an individual, a sort of a person with agency and complete social control over your life. And it's part of the more individualistic world that we live in right now. You know, for years and years and years, this process of individualism taking over from more community-based living has taken a hold. And along with all of that is tied up this idea of living today in a meritocracy where your success as a human being is very much driven by your own hard work and sense of enterprise. Now, that's absolutely brilliant. It feels a lot like progress, especially if things are going well for you and you're living a good life. But if you're not doing so well, if your life is not looking especially rosy, then the meritocratic principle still applies. And in that situation, well, it's all your fault. We don't have this kind of safety net of community around us that is saying, oh, it's just part of being a person, love, move on, it's okay. And because of that, we feel our failure so much more acutely and so much more personally as a kind of deeply personal failure to perform, which is agony.
So we've looked at kind of what's going on. Let's get into the why it's happening and why we're seeing these increases in loneliness. Now, I think an obvious place to start is with technology. So there's a huge body of research that links loneliness to things like social media. So the Joint Research Centre found that 2 hours per day on social network sites is associated with a substantial increase in the prevalence of loneliness. That's a direct quote. Research from MIT and OpenAI found that frequent users of AI chatbots like ChatGPT had increased feelings of loneliness and decreased real-world interactions. So as I said, there's a load of research linking loneliness to social, smartphone use and technology. Worth saying it is a bit chicken and egg. There's also data showing that lonely people use social media more. So it's what you call a bi-directional relationship where one thing is influencing the other.
I think there's also this point about it, which is that people feel like they don't need to actually seek real world interactions because they have social media, because they have opportunities to connect with other people without actually meeting in the real world. And even to entertain themselves. Like it used to be that if you wanted to do something, you would have to find a friend to do that thing with. And now you just have Spotify, you have Netflix, you have this world of entertainment at your fingertips. So why do you actually need to seek companionship? Or at least that's the thinking behind it. But in a way, it just makes you even more isolated.
Yeah, it's so easy to fill the lonely hour. Kind of
yeah, thing. It's like the most extreme version of that Simon and Garfunkel song. I am a rock, I am an island. I have my books and my poetry to protect me.
I have my doom scroll and my playlists to protect me.
It's that, and it's kind of awful. It's really rather sad, I think.
Do you remember this book by Sherry Turkle back in 2011, Alone Together? Basically, what she's talking about is all these people on their own separate devices, but they're all trying to connect with other people, but actually they're not buried in a book, they're buried in their iPad or phone or whatever. And I think even though that was written quite a long time ago now, that point still holds true about how all these people are seeking connectivity through technology, but it actually pulls them further apart from each other.
I think she says specifically that we've traded the richness of conversation for mere connection and all of the loss that implies.
Do you remember there was about 12 years ago, an Australian rail company called V-Line ran an ad campaign aimed at getting young adults to use the rail network more. I love
that campaign. I do remember it.
Good, yeah, the campaign was amazing. So they were targeting young folks who had left home for the big city. They're trying to persuade them to go back home to visit their friends and relatives in the country, but crucially, obviously, use the train to get there. So the whole campaign was called Guilt Trips. It was made by McCann in Melbourne. And at the time, we interviewed the creative director on that campaign, a guy called Patrick Barron, for Contagious IQ. They had this really interesting insight about how technology had become a barrier to real-world relationships. Remember at the time, he said, the ability to keep up with people remotely on Facebook removes any impetus to return to the country towns where they grew up. I think we're kind of seeing a lot of this slightly empty calories, virtual contact, giving the illusion of connection and interaction, but it's kind of taking the place of meeting up in real life.
Yeah. The American journalist Derek Thompson writes really, really interestingly about that. He's written some really sort of seminal essays on, I think one of them is called the Isolated Century. Another essay of his from last year was called The Monks in the Casino. But he talks about this idea of so many of our relationships with the people in our lives, especially family members who we maybe don't see day to day. Those relationships are being reduced to the appearance of text on a glowing screen in our hand. And so the transition from like all of your communication with your family being through that medium to suddenly having one or maybe two or maybe three AI companions is unbelievably small. There's hardly any difference between those relationships if you think about how they're being delivered and what they're giving you.
Yeah, I think there is this, I don't want to overstate it, but it's something of a pernicious impact of technology that does kind of overemphasize and reinforce the importance of the individual in it. So it's, what I have in the past called the me operating system, where, my phone camera is always pointed at me. I make content about myself. My reaction to the thing that's happening is more important to me than the thing that's happening. I track my data, the content, the products always recommend for me, my headphones, cancel the real world out. My camera can just now delete other people from my photos and by extension, delete them from my memories if I don't want to be there. And it's all this tech which kind of makes us feel brilliant. And it is kind of magical because it puts us right at the center of the universe. And to your point earlier, Katrina, someone shouting, "You are not the center of the universe." So much of our technology says, yeah, you are. But I really don't think it's that healthy.
Maybe it's also expecting things to be easy because technology has set that expectation for us.
It is worth saying, of course, it's not all bad. We have somewhat stuck the boot into technology. Technology does some wonderful things for people in terms of, connection and socializing. It's estimated that around about 30% of engaged couples met online. You've got places like Reddit and Discord allowing people to form online communities around all kinds of interest. In some ways, digital is an incredible facilitator of connection and socializing. But I think when we looked into it, all the research does tend to show that in-person interactions are viewed as more enjoyable, they're more fulfilling, generally higher quality than digital interactions. People self-report having a greater sense of well-being after face-to-face interactions. And the general consensus emerging from the research is that, look, digital is better than nothing, but the real world is still better than digital. So maybe let's talk about the real world and how that can be either a root cause helping or sometimes hindering loneliness and isolation as well.
I've just come across this term called lonelygenic. It was coined by a professor of urban health and environment at the University of New South Wales in Australia. And what it means is basically environments. It refers to environments without green spaces. So those dominated by cars and concrete. And what research has found is that if you live in this lonelygenic environment, it can actually aggravate loneliness. So being outside of nature, being indoors all the time, only communicating in digital settings, that can actually make you feel even lonelier. And for people living in this lonelygenic environment, spending an hour or two in nature can make you feel much less isolated, which I think is something I haven't really thought about, is how your environment actually can contribute to increased feelings of isolation.
You could almost say that not being in a natural environment is unnatural.
I guess you could.
Sorry, that was a terrible joke and a gross oversimplification.
But there is a question there of what can people do to actually make environments feel less lonely? How can you actually make people less isolated in the way that cities are built or the way that we construct our environments?
Just on a sort of passing anecdotal level, I was reading an interview in Vanity Fair, I think, about somebody who's deeply involved in the process of planning new housing developments in the States in particular. And he was saying one of the primary considerations when designing these spaces for communal living is that every individual bedroom has enough wall space to hang a really, really large flat screen TV. So this idea that instead of gathering in one room around one TV, everyone will have their own space, their own TV, and that will be it just becomes another factor driving people away from each other.
There's a really interesting historical precedent for using kind of urban planning and the design of urban environments to help combat isolation and loneliness. So back in 1853, the appropriately named Baron Haussmann was put in charge of transforming Paris. And what he was actually trying to do was modernize the city. He was trying to improve public health, traffic flow, that sort of thing. So those famous wide Parisian boulevards, that's Haussmann, right? That's the guy that did it. One of the things he did was put in regulations that incentivized residential apartment blocks that crucially, where the ground floor had to be commercial premises. So you had this ground floor layer of shops, of cafes, bakeries, pharmacies, with apartments directly above them. Now, it wasn't intentional, but what it resulted in was a city that forced social interaction. Everyone went to their local shops, everyone hangs out at their local cafe, you start seeing your neighbours every day, you get a vibrant street life. You actually get a lot of designers and urban planners now, today in the 21st century, refer to Haussmann as someone who unintentionally generated high levels of social interaction. And it just feels a million miles away from a world of Amazon deliveries, out-of-town shopping malls, cities that aren't walkable, all the things that actually are unintentionally eroding that social cohesion. When Haussmann did it, and he didn't even mean to.
And I think when we think back to what we were talking about at the beginning around how dangerous loneliness is for our health, how much it impacts the longevity of our lives, there are daily habits that we can have that make us less lonely.
Like smoking.
No, not smoking. Did you ever watch that Netflix documentary a few years ago? I think it was called Live to 100, about the blue zones. The researcher behind it is called Dan Buettner. And he basically figured out that there were a few communities around the world where people had very high proportions of people living to 100. And what I think is so interesting is when you look at those communities, of course, all the obvious things are there. These people are eating healthily, they're exercising. But what's really interesting and maybe a bit surprising is how important their social interactions are to their longevity of life. So if there are a few kind of key rules for these communities, a few key habits, and so many of them are linked to social ties. So for example, a lot of these communities put their loved ones first. They all belong to a particular faith. It doesn't matter what religion. It's just about having a religion that, again, you congregate together. And they also belong to social networks that then promote these healthy behaviors. One of the most unexpected things about them is that actually in all these blue zone communities, except for one, they also drink alcohol. They're not going binge drinking, but they come together regularly and drink alcohol moderately.
There was a thing about maybe 15 years ago as social media was taking off, where a lot of alcohol brands were kind of quipping that we're the original social network, which became hackneyed quite quickly. But there is definitely a truth to alcohol being playing quite a central role in socialization and bringing people together.
One of the sort of I guess the primary benefits of alcohol has always been that sort of disinhibiting factor behind it. It makes you feel a little bit easier in your skin. It makes you feel a little bit more comfortable around unfamiliar people. And so the conversation starts to flow as the wine starts to flow or as the beers start to flow. There's such a big part of our lives that used to be tied to these sort of social drinking occasions, like going out after work to the pub for a quick drink before going home. But increasingly, some quite profound changes that we're seeing in society, that shift since the pandemic, more working from home, less being in the office together, fewer occasions to like grab a quick drink at the bar. It's having an impact on the amount of time that we spend together. Drinking itself is becoming more expensive. We're seeing some quite interesting economic changes that are impacting our socializing behavior. The cost of living crisis, for example, fewer people are eating out. Maybe you'll get a Deliveroo instead, so you'll get that feeling of somebody else doing the cooking, but you're not spending as much on drinks and sort of lingering over coffee at the end of your meal.
So the cost of living, in a way, is really kind of masking the cost of socialization.
Yeah.
in the case of alcohol, the cost of disinhibition.
I also think that we can't ignore the huge impact that the pandemic had on all of this. I mean, it was all of a sudden one day we were all working from home and we had to relearn how to socialize with each other when we went back into the real world and the pandemic ended.
So let's talk about what this all means for brands, maybe get into some of the brands that are already doing some stuff in this area and doing it quite well. But I think we need to be clear that what we're not saying is lonely people are a big opportunity for marketers.
Yeah, I don't think there's an expectation in society for brands to solve the problem of loneliness. That is not it. But it's more the idea that if loneliness and disconnection are an almost defining part of modern lives, and if brands claim, as they do, to understand people, and if they want attention from audiences that feel increasingly alone, then honestly, we really do have to understand and respond to this situation. So that is the challenge for brands. And I think there are all kinds of opportunities that emerge for them to demonstrate their empathy and their understanding of consumers, whether it's through activations that are creating spaces for people to meet and to gather, reasons for them to do that, fostering community in that way, bringing together, oh gosh, this is a real throwback to the early days of Contagious, bringing together networks of the unacquainted, people who have shared interests to get together and to socialize with each other. There's all kinds of things that brands can do in this space.
I think we're seeing a fair bit of this stuff happening organically anyway. So there's a huge rise in things like running clubs. So the fitness app Strava has reported double-digit growth, specifically in group activities since 2022. We're seeing running clubs being set up as explicitly social endeavours, first and foremost, over just being purely there for fitness. Now, certainly in Europe, live music and events are seeing record attendance. So as an example, in France, back in 2023, there were 205,000 live performances. 1 year later, that was up to 230,000 live performances. I think you can look at something like Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, not just as a music concert, but as like a huge temporary community. It brought people together. It brought them together around a shared passion. It did it in a physical space, and it created social bonds. Taylor Swift has arguably done more for social cohesion with one tour than Mark Zuckerberg has managed in 20 years.
I love that as an idea, especially when you consider that so much of, I think, Taylor Swift's original experience in life was of being excluded at school, not having many friends, really struggling to fit in a lot. So this idea that she's kind of bestrides the world now as a sort of force for bringing people together, creating bonds, I think that's a very kind of powerful and telling thing.
Yeah, there's hope for us all, even if we have been embarrassing boyfriends in the past.
I'm sure you were never an embarrassing boyfriend, Alex.
You'd lose that bet, Katrina. Let's talk specifically about brands and who's actually doing this well, do we think?
I'm going to build an awkward little bridge between Taylor Swift and Heineken right here, right now, and you can't stop me.
I'm here for the awkward bridge.
I think Heineken is a really interesting brand, actually, when it comes to sort of responding to this sort of lonely world that we're living in right now. They're doing a lot of different things in different parts of the world to address it. Not least of which is their recent activation at Coachella, the festival over in California. They've got this new global sponsorship platform that is called Fans Have More Friends. So it's built on this idea that shared passions turn strangers into friends. One of their Coachella activations was to create a little device called a clinker, which is a sort of electronic band that fits over your can of Heineken. And if you clink it with somebody else in that kind of concert environment, it connects you to their Spotify playlist, I think, Chloe, is this right?
Yeah, that's right.
It sort of shows you the percentage to which you have music in common with that person. So it's instantly looking for something that you share in terms of your preferences around music as a way of helping to connect you. Heineken has also done so much in the realm of protecting the third spaces, the built environments that foster community. So in Ireland, they have a platform called For the Love of Pubs that celebrates and reinforces the role of the pub in Irish culture. They had a brilliant campaign called Pub Succession that searched the entire Irish diaspora across the world to find someone who would inherit a a family pub that was about to fall out of family hands. In Seoul, they're driving the transformation of urban rooftops into places to hang out.
It sounds like a lot of what they do is around like not just creating the spaces, but actually maintaining the spaces where socialization can happen. Right.
Absolutely. And I guess we should give a shout out to their agency, Le Pub Worldwide.
One of the opportunities I think is really interesting for brand is to be this kind of host, to provide spaces for people, to kind of welcome them in. I think for me, the one brand that really stands out, I think in some ways does it better than anyone else, is Games Workshop. So this is the fancy toy and game manufacturer from the UK, probably best known for Warhammer. It's Dungeons and Dragons, Lord of the Rings sort of territory, tiny miniature plastic figurines. But what it's done in terms of socialization is it's turned all its stores kind of into social hubs. So if you've never been to one of these stores, if you're totally new to the world, you can come in and they will teach you how to play the games. They'll teach you how to paint the little models. It's incredibly welcoming spaces where you get mentoring if you're a beginner. So there's always that kind of draw, that attraction to bring you into the store. So like, that's kind of local level stuff. Then on the international level, they stage events like Warhammer World Championship, which brings people together to play the games all across the globe. All of which obviously is great for the community, but does the retailer's dream. It just drives footfall in store. So I think year on year, they've seen a 46% increase of people ordering online specifically to then go and pick it up in store because the in-store experience is so good. Now, because it is very Dungeons and Dragons, very Lord of the Rings, right?
Very nerdy, that's what you're trying to say.
Well, it's interesting you say that. From the outside, it looks like nerd's paradise, right? But that's the point. If you're a nerd, it is paradise. It's the place you want to be. It's the world you want to hang out in. It's the clan you want to join. And it's been crazy successful. So this, brand and this company set up, I think, in 1975. In the last 10 years, they've quadrupled their revenues, profits up 11-fold, share price up 32-fold. And this is explicitly since they've pivoted to this let's bring people together strategy, which they've explicitly stated as one of their key aims is give Warhammer fans across the world the opportunity to meet up with each other. Direct quote.
I have heard you evangelizing about Games Workshop many times, Alex. And
I think she's calling you a nerd, Alex. Sorry.
And an embarrassing boyfriend. This is the worst afternoon of my life.
But I've found it so interesting because the more I've read about them, the more I've become aware that they put a tremendous emphasis on hiring staff for their people skills and for their ability to make people feel at ease and welcome and enthusiastic about getting involved in the game of Warhammer. And to me, it sort of connects the dots to another thing that I was reading lately about the rise of what this trend analyst called Anu Lingala describes as charisma capital. This idea that in a world that is desperately looking for ways to bring people together, what we need more than ever are people who are adept social connectors, who do that thing of introducing person X to person Y. People with mad social skills who are the people who create that sense of belonging in a room full of strangers. And I feel as though there's a huge opportunity for brands to work out ways in which they can encourage and develop those skills in their staff.
What about you, Chloe? What brand stands out for you in this space?
I was thinking about a really retro brand, which very much links to what Katrina was saying, which is Tupperware. I mean, Tupperware is actually the brand that used to bring people together in communities of really isolated housewives because it disguised a sales opportunity into this party framework. And we're actually seeing interesting things happening beyond just the retail environment that brands are doing and also beyond those third spaces. So I'm going to go from Tupperware over to Japan, and another brand I bet you haven't thought about when it comes to doing interesting things, which is Yakult in Japan.
Yeah, that's not where my that's not where my mind leapt to. Is every bridge here going to be weak and tenuous?
Bear with me.
I'm here for it, but the civil engineering is sketchy at best.
Where there are these brands that basically they set up these door-to-door salespeople or salespeople as their kind of connection to community. Tupperware is definitely one. Avon is another one historically that has kind of been seen as these kind of the people selling the products are the pillars of the community. And the same is in Yakult. And I don't know if you know that much about Yakult as a brand. I kind of went down this Yakult wormhole.
You'll be surprised how little I know about Yakult.
It's
So go.
weird. I mean, first of all, it is basically fermented dairy. That's weird to start with. And when the brand was launched in 1935, guess what? People in Japan thought it was weird too. I mean, they basically had to encourage people to drink bacteria and teach them that drinking bacteria is healthy. So to do this, they employed what they call the Yakult Lady. So door-to-door salespeople who go to your house and explain why gut health should be an important thing to you and why you should drink this weird little drink in this little bottle with the red cap. But then what they realize is that there is this secondary benefit to these salespeople, which is they were this connection for these lonely people. And especially in a country like Japan, which now has an even more aging population than it ever did before, these relationships that this brand had with people through its salespeople, they were able to notice small changes in health and lifestyle in these customers, be a familiar face for them. And when you consider things like the lonely death epidemic in Japan, which is where you have 70,000 people a year dying, these lonely deaths where nobody discovers that they're dead for a certain period, which is really depressing. These kind of brands who are coming door to door can actually be a savior.
I just cannot resist the opportunity to talk for a moment about my favorite campaign of all that I've read about recently. And it's the simplest thing ever that speaks to that point of yours, Chloe, precisely. It's a civic campaign from the town of Luleå in Sweden, encouraging citizens in the community to say hi to each other anytime they saw somebody on the street, especially in the darker winter months, which go on and on and on. Say hi, everybody. That was the extent of the campaign. Because all it takes in somebody's long and lonely day is a single syllable to make them feel seen and connected to the rest of the community. And for me, that's been one of the biggest kind of lessons of the last year, this idea that the smallest thing can make a difference to somebody who's feeling a bit low or feeling a bit cut off. And if you take one single solitary thing from this podcast, it would be the difference that that one syllable can make for me.
I love it. I love it.
Okay, so we've gone from some of the miserable data around loneliness and through technology, AI companions, through kind of urban planning, right up to gut health and a single syllable that can change communities. Let's see if we can muster up some takeouts, shall we? And Chloe, I'm going to come to you first. What's your big takeout for brands here?
I think my big takeout for brands is that sometimes the most obvious solution or the most obvious route into helping people with loneliness and fostering community is the best one. So create a third space, help people say hi, bring people together, encourage people to be better salespeople and have relationships in stores and out of stores. I think it's that reminder that sometimes it's actually not that hard. And if you just go back to how we were doing things before, we can actually gain back that sense of community.
What about you, Katrina? What's your concise sum up and takeout?
Okay, for me, the big takeaway is to think about the social skills apocalypse and the idea that there are so many people out there who feel so unbelievably awkward about the simplest social interactions. I think the biggest thing that so many brands can do is find ways to remove the awkwardness from what might seem like simple interactions. Find ways to make people feel less awkward. That's my takeaway.
Fantastic stuff. I think my takeout is that the next era of brands probably looks more like Baron Haussmann than Mark Zuckerberg. So intentional design that creates not just real world social connections and interactions, but actually repeated ones. I think, when you look at running clubs, gaming meetups, events, cafes, it's always the real world that's valued more highly than digital interactions. And it's the repetition that builds value. It builds memory structures, builds trust, builds loyalty, all those good things. If you want to know more about some of the things we talked about today, so in terms of the research about how AI usage correlates with loneliness, the study is called Investigating Effective Use and Emotional Wellbeing on ChatGPT. That's from OpenAI and MIT. Derek Thompson's article that Katrina mentioned earlier is called The Monks in the Casino. A couple of books we recommend are Together, Loneliness, Health and What Happens When We Find Connection. That's by Vivek Murthy. Love Machines by James Muldoon, which is all about our relationship with technology as a companion. And Transforming Paris, The Life and Labours of Baron Haussmann by David Jordan. Now, specifically, if you work in marketing or advertising, over on Contagious IQ, you can check out our trend on marketing in a loneliness epidemic. And we've got in-depth analysis of Games Workshop, of Heineken, a whole lot of interesting stuff about AI companions. And if you want to know more about Taylor Swift, just mention her name and a herd of Swifties will be immediately conjured to fill you in. Until next time, hope you enjoyed the show. Goodbye.
This is Contagious.